Well, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu said in Jerusalem just before 7 o'clock this evening when that ceasefire began. Let's get some reaction to the events. Rachel Shabi is the author of Not the Enemy, Israel's Jews from Arab Lands, a book on Israel's Oriental Jews. She's here with me. And in Tel Aviv, Brigadier General Mike Herzog, who's former Chief of Staff to the Israeli Defense Minister. Rachel Shabi, to you first, what's your reaction to this ceasefire and whether you think it has any chance of holding?
It's a very fragile ceasefire, and right up to the last minute, we heard that Gaza was being bombarded. Your own correspondents were reporting that right up until the last minute. So it was like everybody wanted to get rid of all their weapons before the ceasefire took hold. Now it's taking hold for 24 hours. Before further conditions are discussed and imposed. But the trouble is that this ceasefire is the wording is very ambiguous about the conditions that relate to easing the siege on Gaza. And we have to remember that that is the root cause of this conflict, the fact that the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have been occupied. They are under a very punishing siege. 70% of the population is on aid, 30% of the population is unemployed, and part of the reason for that is because they cannot get construction materials in and they cannot get exports out, so they are economically crippled and will continue to be unless there are changes made to the Israeli blockade of Gaza.
Let me explore that detail with you in a bit more, to a greater extent in a moment. Mike Herzog, your reaction to what's happened in the last half an hour and whether you think it can hold?
Hello?
Hello, Mike Herzog. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
OK. I'm interested to hear your reaction to the declaration of this ceasefire and whether you think it can hold.
I think it can hold, but that depends whether the ceasefire will be stabilized and sustained with some additional elements. It's essentially a two-phased process. First of all, the parties are withholding fire, but then, according to the Egyptian announcement, after 24 hours, they are supposed to start discussing additional elements to support and sustain the ceasefire, including Israel's concern about the smuggling of weapons into Gaza and some other elements, and the Hamas demand to open passages for people and goods, and these issues will have to be discussed later. And if agreements are reached, then I think this will sustain a ceasefire for, I hope, as long as possible. Nobody is under the illusion that this is going to be a long-lasting or everlasting ceasefire. Ultimately, deterrence, fades out. Since 2008 and 2009, we had 4 years almost, and ceasefire was very solid for more than 2 years until it began to erode. So the hope for Israelis is that, and for Palestinians, is that this will hold for a long period of time and will be a durable ceasefire.
OK. You've both highlighted various elements that need to come in 24 hours' time, albeit from your different perspectives. So let me explore those with you both. Rachel Shabi, we've just heard what Mike Herzog was saying about the Israeli concerns beyond 24 hours. Do you acknowledge those as part of this wider picture?
Well, the Israeli concerns are actually counterintuitive in this regard, because the reason that there are weapons being smuggled into Gaza is because those tunnels are in operation, and they wouldn't be in operation if there wasn't a siege. So it actually goes back to the same point, which is that if Israel eased its blockade on the Gaza Strip, which has had a punishing effect on the population, it would also, by definition, remove the tunnels which are a smuggling route into Gaza for weapons.
OK. Mike Herzog, let me put that back to you. Do you acknowledge those concerns from the Palestinian point of view, from the Hamas point of view?
I acknowledge some concerns, but I totally disagree with the false narrative, as if the core reason for what happened is a siege on Gaza. First of all, Gaza is not really under siege. Averagely, every day, over 200 Israeli trucks enter Gaza with humanitarian assistance. The border with Egypt is open for people. The fact that it's not open for goods is first and foremost because the Egyptians don't want to open it, and there are dozens of humanitarian projects and construction projects inside Gaza carried out by the UN with Israel's assistance. The real reason for this conflict is that armed groups in Gaza fired rockets on Israeli citizens. Let's say the truth here. Now, I certainly acknowledge that there are some concerns for people in Gaza, but they could be met only if Israel's security concerns are met and that Israel is assured that no weapons will be further smuggled into Gaza.
OK, you've both made your point of view on that, and again, disagreement, although you still want to end up with peace via different routes. And I was showing some pictures, or we were showing you some pictures, whether we can go back to them now, some live pictures from Gaza City as we talk, where, as you can see now, quite large numbers of people have taken to the streets in the centre of Gaza City, and I'm told by colleagues that there has been the sound of celebratory gunfire in several parts of the city, and as you can see on the screen there, reference to a possible Hamas news conference in Cairo fairly soon. A final point to you both, if I may. Rachel, Shabi, the role of the Egyptians here, the significance of it, and whether it is very different this time round because we have a new government in Cairo.
I mean, the Egyptian President Morsi was, I think, placed in a very difficult position here where he had to balance conflicting interests. On the one side, the new Egypt with a new Muslim Brotherhood leadership had to show and wanted to show some solidarity and support to Hamas and the Palestinian people. On the other hand, Morsi had to maintain and honour his peace treaty, Egypt's peace treaty with Israel, which has been in place since 1979. And he managed to balance all those things very successfully, albeit that he was hindered by the fact that he didn't really have much international support, in the sense that Western leaders, particularly the US, have shown themselves once again to be partisan and dishonest brokers. The fact that they were constantly asking Hamas to cease fire, but never asking Israel to do the same, a very imbalanced position, which ultimately is detrimental for Palestinians and Israelis.
OK, Mike Herzog, a final word to you on the role of the Egyptians and whether that's changed this time round.
I think the Egyptians continue to play a key role here. They are uniquely positioned to play that role because they are neighboring both Israel and Gaza, because some of the key elements of any sustainable ceasefire are in their own hands, like stopping smuggling through Sinai into Gaza. Plus, I think that even though they are much closer to Hamas than to Israel, and they distance themselves from Israel, they are at the same time careful to maintain a peace agreement with Israel, and their close relations with Hamas also afford them an opportunity to influence that organization. That's how they secured the ceasefire. The Egyptians have some of their own concerns which are in sync with ours, including they don't want to see jihadis in Gaza and Sinai threaten status quo. So this basically gives us an opportunity to work together in order to stabilize the situation.
OK, forgive me for interrupting and cutting this conversation off, but we have got that press conference to go to. But thank you both very much indeed for taking part in that discussion. Let's go straight to